Hello, everybody. Today we were going to talk about Tokyo, Japan, and it occurred to me that it's one of the wealthiest cities in the planet, and it's a very important city in the Far East. As you'll see, there's a huge amount of people that live in Tokyo, and there's a very interesting kind of geography of what's going on in the region there in Tokyo. So we're going to go through quite a lot of information. I'll just blast through everything right now. Here's the population map, kind of comparing that to rest of Korea, Beijing and Shanghai. One thing that you might not be aware of is how close Taiwan and Shanghai is, as well as Beijing. A lot of people know that Korea is very close, but actually China is very close as well. So there's a lot of cultural influences as a result of proximity. So here's an Earth at night map, and it's kind of hard to see some of the details. But basically what I wanted to point out is that it's not as simple as you may think. How the culture is interconnected with Tokyo. Basically, Tokyo being the brightest here, almost as bright and probably maybe even brighter than Shanghai. So you can see of these bunches, and actually Korea taking quite a lot of that nighttime brightness as well. So it's kind of debatable with Seoul, but basically. Tokyo is one of the busiest and largest and most electric cities in the world. So here you can see that Tokyo actually is a small piece here, but it extends quite far out in the metropolitan area, 100 miles or more. Out into the kind of the inland areas. So it actually used to be a lot of farmland and kind of a river valley, as we'll see. Here you can kind of see, this was a pretty careful diagram because you can kind of start to see how each of these branches start to fit in. So say if you live on the north side of Tokyo, you can kind of see that is all heading out to this kind of beach region as well as here. So there's kind of a mysterious piece of the puzzle, which we really should kind of talk about, which is this whole kind of peninsula area, because actually the river kind of drains this way. So I should maybe do that in blue, but you can kind of see that it's not exactly what you think, although that you can't really be on the floodplain. So a lot of this is over here because there's basically mountains. So a lot of this is up into the mountains in just outside of Tokyo, and this is about 100 or so miles across that you're looking at, so it's pretty far distance as well. Here you can see more of that river. So this shows how that river actually goes this way, and there's actually kind of a separate river heading into what's known as like downtown Tokyo. So there's a couple different river systems, and it is pretty hilly and mountainous outside. And then you have Mount Fuji, obviously, in the distance there, being a very big mountain. So here is some of the dirt. So this is interesting because sometimes you can get some of the same feel. So if you live over in this part of Tokyo, it's pretty similar to here in terms of the dirt. And you can see that floodplain where that is exactly. So it kind of heads out that way, making it up in here where we saw more population being outside of that floodplain. So that kind of could cause some problems. The other interesting thing is looking at how this whole beach area is pretty significant on Tokyo's waterfront property. So actually there's quite a lot of traffic here, but dang, look at the traffic just over here. This was the peninsula where that river drained on the other photographs. And then the power picture is pretty interesting because you kind of see some weird power stations that you might not anticipate how Tokyo is powered on the electric grid. And then the population, I really wanted to compare this all the way down to Jakarta, Indonesia. And you can see what happened to Jakarta. It's just been packed with people. So the temperature actually gets quite a bit colder in Japan. And some of that might be just due to temperature, right? So actually, it's kind of a debate whether the Philippines will fill in first or Japan. But right now, the population density is pretty similar in the Philippines as it is in Japan. So that's kind of an interesting for island, at least in the island cultures as well as Taiwan. So there is quite a lot of people in Tokyo, and that would be very interesting to see. But the problem is that there's so many natural disasters, and we'll see earthquakes, and some other problems. Now, on the roadway map, we do see a new kind of concept where you're actually heading down south further into Japan, and that's actually opened up here. See a couple roads kind of blocking that pathway there, and then pretty much most of the traffic being on the north side of Tokyo. Basically, this all is suburban Tokyo. So the interesting thing is that probably a lot of people that are living in the northern side of Tokyo should start considering living in the south side of Tokyo, or even other areas. So although the real estate prices may be more expensive, it's interesting to look at how that all fits in with different parts of Tokyo. This map kind of showed the end of the world here, right? So you kind of see how you basically stop the air traffic right around Tokyo. And actually, even down here, Sydney and New Zealand gets a lot of air traffic. But basically, in the Far East, this is pretty much it. The air traffic pretty much stops here, and then there's a few transcontinental aircrafts, primarily are flying between North America and Europe, as well as heading out into India. So it's something to think about if you are trying to do business in Tokyo. Actually, it's going to be with India and Southeast Asia, and maybe even out into Australia, more so than even the United States to some extent. So if you are traveling, it's important to think about that, the travel map. And then if we zoom in a little bit more, we see some weird things where there's actually quite a bit of separation. So we see most of this heading out into Bangkok, actually. So here is probably, this is Hong Kong. So you see a lot of traffic between Hong Kong and Tokyo. And then actually Bangkok being down here, and then even Manila, Philippines. So that gives a zoomed in perspective. And then when we zoom in even more, we start to see that Seoul is actually probably that major city as well. So if you're starting to do business in Japan, you probably want to work through Korea as well, just because of the flights and all the transportation and current business being done between Korea and Japan. So something to think about. And the weird thing that I realized about this is that Beijing is kind of separated from all this. So you see these weird pockets where you don't have any air traffic, basically heading into Iran and the Middle East. And that was really surprising to me to see those little pockets there. So on the weather front, there's actually, I heard the most snow in the world actually gets into Japan for some reason. So this is actually lightning map. So it's a little bit different, but it does give you some idea for how the weather might be. Actually, it dries up a little bit there and turns into snow in the northern part of Japan. So, and then here's the part that you really should be concerned about is actually the earthquakes. So I'm actually a little bit uneasy. This is just the earthquakes in the last 30 days. And you can see there's some quite big earthquakes happening here along this fault line. And actually even gets even more crazy once you get up into Alaska. So believe it or not, people are living here. So basically this is all that kind of the epicenter. If you look at all this, this is all kind of converging up into Tokyo, which is one of the reasons why they got that 9.0 fairly recently. And you can see the weather map also kind of shows some interesting things. So a lot of people have actually migrated south. So although Tokyo's up in here, this is kind of the colder city of the bunch. You get down to Osaka, and then you head into Shanghai, and you get pretty much the same temperatures across these regions, as well as south part of Korea. And it just shows that basically the population, actually the trend is actually heading south, not necessarily north. So you can get a little bit confused because, man, Tokyo is such a big city, but yet the vast majority of the people are actually moving south along that line probably. So and just kind of the emphasis here being Shanghai, right? So if you are doing business and in the climate, it's kind of a similar kind of climate to some extent. It's a little bit warmer, obviously, in Shanghai. And you might be surprised, it's actually pretty warm year-round. It only gets up to about 88 degrees in the summertime. August is the peak. And then December, right around now, is when you get to 49 degrees, which is actually pretty comfortable when you think about it. A lot of California gets to be around 50, 60 degrees in the wintertime. So you get basically similar to what California gets, and maybe even not as hot as some areas in the inland area. You can see quite a bit of rain too, which can be nice, not just to have dry weather like there is in California, and then actually quite a bit of sunlight because it is pretty close to the equator. And then there's basically, from the climate map and temperature, the average temperature year-round, you can kind of see that, yeah, it is kind of average temperature, similar to most of mainland China, as well as a lot of this European stuff. So it's actually probably most related to European climate in Japan. So that's one of the interesting things to think about when doing business there in Tokyo, Japan. I'm going to pause this for a moment and see what kind of things are going on. If there's any questions people have, we can catch up to that. So yeah, so just look at this spectacular map of Japan. You can see it's arching all across the far east, and then you can see Osaka actually being kind of the next big city outside of Tokyo, and how different Osaka is. And actually a lot of people prefer, just because we're doing a topic on Tokyo, there is other places in Japan that are maybe even more preferable. So like we mentioned, a lot of that population is actually moving south, even though in Tokyo there's this branch that kind of moves north, and this area here kind of moves north, and that's just because of the geography, that local geography. But on the south side is something definitely to think about, and there is just more beachfront property down in southern Japan, because you basically have both coasts here. And that makes it for a more pleasant environment just because you're right along the ocean front. You might want to dive into this global wealth, but basically the GDP in Tokyo is quite a bit higher than even New York City. So it's just because it's a larger, much larger city, but the GDP per capita is actually much lower than many places in the United States. So per person is a little different. But there is a heck of a lot of money in Tokyo, and you can see a list of cities by GDP rank. Let's even see if we can get the latest data. It might be different right now, so we'll just see if this can load up. Sorry, it's taking a little bit. So this is kind of metropolitan population. Let's see if we can sort this by GDP. See what shows up. So actually currently New York is a little bit higher than Tokyo, so it can change from year to year, and actually I should probably just grab this data and move this over, and you can see Los Angeles, Paris being really high. So this is again kind of not the best way to look at it. It is important to look at it per capita. So but you can see at one point in just recent years, about the last couple of years, things have changed by quite a bit. And New York has kind of really overtaken Tokyo, but at one point Tokyo actually was worth more than I heard the real estate there was worth more than all of the United States, unbelievably. So you might want to take another careful look at this map, just looking at some of the coastal stuff. So one of the problems is that a lot of this population is kind of migrating north, whereas it's a little bit more complicated to migrate south down to Osaka, right? So it may actually be preferable to live down in here, and there may actually be even cheaper housing in some places, some circumstances. It's just the road system is difficult to get down there because of the mountains. So if you look at the relief map, you can see basically you're kind of having to get around Mount Fuji to get over here down to Osaka. And you can see that probably even here would be nicer, maybe even to live than in Osaka in some instances, because there's a lot more rivers. But anyway, so something to think about in terms of the geography. And then I would definitely take a careful look at the soil map. You can kind of see where some of those floodplain problems are. So if you are thinking about, there's a lot of abandoned houses apparently in outside rural Tokyo right now, and they're trying to get things sorted out. And then this fishing map is also really fun to look at. As you see, we looked all the way up to the north side here, and you can see there's a couple ports that are actually kind of part of Tokyo. I wouldn't call this part of Tokyo, but it's basically a metropolitan area. Right here's Tokyo, considered proper. But it's just such a vast expanse now of population that it's basically a lot of people commute in. So I wanted to show I think hopefully the Tokyo Metro map, which is this one, so you can kind of see how people get around. It's kind of a cool map. Looks a little bit different than the New York City subway map. It's actually a little bit more squiggly and weird. It's not so straight lines as you may think in Tokyo, and as well as the road map looks pretty interesting as well because there's lots of mountains to get through. And then some of these roads heading down to southern Japan would be interesting to think about. And then definitely take a look again at the flight map if you have some time. Anyway, I hope you've enjoyed this study of Tokyo, Japan. Let me know what kinds of ideas you have. Particularly, this was kind of looking at how we are related. Tokyo is related to many of the other cities in the area, and there's certainly a lot to go through here. Especially as you zoom out, you can start to see Taiwan and the Philippines, and then even Hong Kong would be interesting to kind of connect the dots on how it works together internationally with Tokyo. Thank you so much. Hope you enjoyed the study.